The Draconian Supreme Court was a marvel of alien architecture, basalt columns that twisted like frozen serpents, rising through a chamber illuminated by plasma conduits that pulsed with an angry red light. Marcus Davidson stood motionless, his hands manacled with quantum lock restraints that would atomize his wrists if he attempted to remove them. Around him, the courtroom bristled with xenobiological tension. Draconians weren't just reptilian. They were a species evolved from apex predators of their homeworld, each movement a calculated display of evolutionary superiority. Their scaled skin reflected the plasma light, creating an illusion of constant motion, of barely contained violence. The prosecutor, a high-ranking Draconian named Zixtel, wasn't interested in human concepts of justice. This was a ritual, a public spectacle designed to reinforce the Empire's absolute dominance. Holographic displays flickered behind him, showing Marcus's alleged crimes: unauthorized planetary survey, violation of interstellar quarantine zones, and most damning of all, active resistance against Draconian territorial expansion. What the prosecutors didn't know was the true nature of Marcus's mission. He was no ordinary explorer, no rogue adventurer. He was a seed, a carefully planted agent of humanity's most classified deep reconnaissance program. The neural implant nestled against his brain stem was more than a communication device. It was a quantum-encrypted data matrix, capable of storing and transmitting information in ways that would take Draconian cryptographers centuries to comprehend. Each moment in this courtroom was another layer of intelligence gathered, another thread in a complex tapestry of human understanding. Zixtel's voice cut through the chamber like a plasma blade. Human designation: Marcus Davidson. Your species represents a unique problem for the Draconian Imperium. You are neither sufficiently advanced to be a threat, nor primitive enough to be easily subjugated. Marcus said nothing. Silence was a weapon he had learned to wield with precision. The holographic displays shifted, showing a tactical overlay of human expansion. Planets conquered, civilizations assimilated, a graphic representation of the Draconian Empire's relentless progress. But between the lines of this display, Marcus saw something the Draconians couldn't: potential, weakness, opportunity. His capture had been deliberate, a calculated risk approved by Earth's most secretive strategic planning division. While other intelligence agencies play political chess, this team operated on a different level entirely. They didn't just gather information, they planted seeds of systemic disruption. The manacles hummed with quantum energy, a constant reminder of the technological gulf between human adaptability and Draconian control. But Marcus knew something the Draconians didn't. Every system had a flaw. Every lock could be picked. Every empire had a breaking point. Zixtel continued his pronouncement. The sentence is absolute. Execution by ritual combat in the pit of Karax. You will face the last guardian, a creature that has consumed thousands of prisoners. Your death will be a message to your entire species. A ripple of anticipation moved through the Draconian audience. This wasn't just an execution. It was a public statement, a demonstration of absolute power. What they didn't see was the microscopic transmitter embedded in Marcus's molar, the nanite cluster hidden within his bone marrow, the quantum-entangled communication bridge that meant he was never truly alone, never truly isolated. As they led him away, Marcus caught the eye of a junior Draconian guard. Just for a moment. Just long enough to see a flicker of something unexpected. Doubt. Curiosity. The first crack in a seemingly impenetrable system. The doors of the Supreme Court slid open, revealing a transport vessel that would carry him to the legendary pit of Karax. Outside, the Draconian cityscape stretched in impossible geometric patterns, a civilization built on the bones of conquered worlds. Marcus allowed himself the smallest of smiles. They thought this was an execution. He knew it was just the beginning. The pit was no ordinary prison. It was a geological nightmare crafted with surgical precision. Layers of compressed metamorphic rock told a story older than the Draconian civilization itself. Each strata was a historical record, compressed by millennia of planetary pressure, telling tales of civilizations long forgotten. Marcus's descent was controlled chaos. Electromagnetic dampeners in his bone-weave jumpsuit engaged, creating micro-repulsion fields that subtly altered his trajectory. What should have been a fatal plummet became a calculated insertion, his body moving with the precision of a surgical instrument. Impact wasn't about surviving. It was about gathering intelligence. The moment his boots touched the ground, a cascade of microscopic sensors activated, embedded throughout his clothing. These weren't just protective gear, but a living, breathing reconnaissance system. Quantum resonance scanners mapped the cavern's internal structure, detecting stress fractures, moisture gradients, and thermal anomalies invisible to conventional detection methods. Bioluminescent fungi weren't merely passive organisms. They were an entire ecosystem in silent communication. Each glowing tendril was a biological data transmission network, pulsing with chemical signals that spoke of centuries of adaptation. Marcus's implanted bioanalysis module began decoding these subtle communications, transforming alien biology into actionable intelligence. The cavern's acoustic properties were bizarre. Sound didn't travel normally here. Certain frequencies seemed to bend, creating acoustic shadows and unexpected resonance points. Marcus's auditory implants worked overtime, triangulating sound sources that existed beyond normal human perception. A distant rumble wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration that carried geological information, the movement of massive subterranean structures, the breathing of something ancient and incomprehensible. Scattered around the cavern floor were remains, not just bones, but technological artifacts from countless failed prisoners. Each piece told a story. A fractured communication device from a silicon-based life form, a quantum crystalline weapon fragment from a species humanity had never encountered. The Draconians didn't just capture prisoners, they collected them. Marcus's environmental suit began its most critical function. It wasn't just protection. It was a living, adaptive system that continuously analyzed and responded to the environment. Microscopic nanite clusters within the fabric began absorbing and neutralizing potential toxins, converting atmospheric particulates into breathable oxygen, creating a micro-ecosystem around his body. The walls of the pit were not natural. They were engineered, each surface designed to prevent escape, with molecular lock surfaces that would resist traditional climbing techniques. But resist didn't mean impossible to a human mind trained in adaptive problem-solving. Thermal imaging revealed hidden passages. Microscopic fissures that would be invisible to most species showed potential escape routes. The pit wasn't a simple execution chamber. It was a complex testing ground, a place where the Draconian Empire evaluated potential threats. Something moved in the darkness. Not a sound, not a vibration. A quantum-level disturbance that registered on Marcus's most advanced sensors before any conventional detection method could even begin to comprehend its existence. The dragon wasn't just a creature. It was a living, breathing anomaly that defied multiple scientific paradigms. Geological time seemed to compress. The cavern wasn't just a physical space. It was a living memory, a record of countless encounters, of species tested and found wanting. Marcus was now part of that record, another data point in an endless experiment. His neural implant began correlating data, the pit's construction, the biological signatures, the quantum-level disturbances. This was more than a prison. This was a crucible, a place designed to test the absolute limits of survival. The first droplet of moisture that hit the ground wasn't water. It was something else entirely. A chemical signature that spoke of complex biological processes far beyond human understanding. Something was watching. Not with eyes. Not with any sense humans could comprehend. And it was curious. The first true contact was nothing like any xenobiological encounter in human history. Most species communicate through sound, light, chemical exchanges. But this was something entirely different. The dragon's awareness expanded like a quantum probability field, probing Marcus's existence with layers of perception that transcended traditional sensory understanding. Genetic memory flickered between them. Not memories as humans understood them, linear, narrative constructs, but a holographic tapestry of evolutionary experience. Marcus saw fragments, ancient civilizations rising and falling, planetary migrations, survival strategies developed over millions of years of cosmic evolution. The creature's body was a living archive. Each scale was more than protective armor. It was a data storage medium. Microscopic crystalline structures within its biological matrix held information compressed across millennia. Where human technology required massive computational arrays, this being stored entire civilizational histories in a single dermal layer. Marcus realized he wasn't facing a simple predator. This was a sentient archive, a living repository of cosmic knowledge that had survived multiple extinction events. Its eyes were quantum sensors, not optical in any traditional sense, but probability interfaces that could perceive multiple potential realities simultaneously. When it looked at Marcus, it wasn't seeing a single human. It was observing potential versions of his existence, parsing through quantum probability branches. The neural implant in Marcus's skull began to tremble, not from fear, but from the sheer computational load of processing this multidimensional awareness. His most advanced human technology was struggling to interface with a consciousness that operated on principles humanity was only beginning to understand. Communication wasn't going to be verbal. It would be a complex dance of quantum entanglement, biological signal processing, and evolutionary recognition. The dragon's body temperature fluctuated in mathematically precise patterns. Each temperature shift was a language. Complex equations of survival, of territorial mapping, of genetic memory transfer. Marcus's environmental suit began translating these thermal variations into comprehensible data streams. Surrounding them, the pit's ecosystem responded. Bioluminescent organisms synchronized their light pulses, creating interference patterns that seemed to carry additional layers of information. The very rock seemed to breathe, geological time compressing and expanding in response to this encounter. What the Draconian Empire considered a simple execution chamber was actually a sophisticated first contact zone, a place where species were evaluated, where potential was measured not by technological advancement, but by adaptive capability. The dragon's initial assessment of Marcus was brutal in its efficiency. Humans were a relatively young species, technologically primitive, biologically fragile, evolutionarily recent. But something else registered in its multidimensional perception, a quality that defied standard biological categorization: adaptability. Not just the ability to change, but to transform entire systemic paradigms. Quantum probability calculations began streaming through Marcus's neural interface, millions of potential interaction scenarios, each branch revealing different survival strategies. The dragon was wargaming their encounter in real time, exploring every possible outcome with mathematical precision. Its body began to subtly shift, not a physical transformation in any traditional sense, but a quantum-level reconfiguration. Cellular structures realigning, preparing for potential conflict, potential cooperation. Each movement was a complex mathematical equation made flesh. Marcus stood completely still. Human stillness was different from the stillness of other species. It wasn't passive. It was a calculated form of active observation, a predatory patience developed through millions of years of survival on a challenging, unpredictable planet. The first true moment of mutual recognition wasn't dramatic. It was a quantum resonance, a split-second alignment of evolutionary potential that passed between them faster than thought, faster than light. The dragon saw something in Marcus that transcended its previous encounters. A species that didn't just survive. A species that reimagined survival itself. Entropy became a weapon. Marcus's survival kit wasn't a collection of tools. It was a modular ecosystem of adaptive technology. Each component existed in a state of quantum potentiality, capable of transforming based on environmental demands. What appeared to be a simple multi-tool was actually a fractal-based computational matrix that could reconfigure its molecular structure instantaneously. The dragon's initial assault wasn't just a biological response. It was a complex information probe, a multispectral attack designed to test Marcus's fundamental capabilities. Plasma-like energy erupted from biological chambers deep within the creature's respiratory system, a weapon that combined thermal, electromagnetic, and quantum disruptive properties. Most species would have been annihilated before comprehending the attack's complexity. Marcus's jumpsuit was a living defense system engineered at the bleeding edge of human adaptive technology. Developed by a black-budget research division that existed only in whispers, the fabric was a nanotechnological marvel. Graphene diamond composite threads interwoven with quantum reactive polymers created a defense mechanism that was part material science, part predictive algorithm. The attack hit like a solar flare. But instead of destruction, something extraordinary happened. The jumpsuit didn't just absorb or deflect energy. It analyzed, interpreted, and began to generate a counter-resonance. Nanoscale processors embedded within the fabric's molecular structure began a real-time deconstruction of the dragon's energy signature. Each molecular thread became a computational node, transforming the entire garment into a distributed intelligence network. Thermal energy was converted. Electromagnetic waves were parsed. Quantum disruption fields were not just neutralized but studied, cataloged, understood. From a hidden compartment, so microscopically integrated into his bone structure that standard scanning methods would never detect it, Marcus retrieved a device that defied conventional technological understanding. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a tool. It was a communication matrix designed to bridge incomprehensible biological communication systems. The device was a product of humanity's most radical scientific thinking. Developed in research facilities so classified that their very existence was a mathematical probability rather than a confirmed fact. Quantum entanglement communication systems that could translate not just language, but fundamental experiential frameworks. Biological systems, Marcus knew, were fundamentally different from mechanical communication. They didn't just transmit information. They negotiated meaning through complex biochemical interactions, evolutionary memory, and probabilistic communication models. The communication matrix began its work. Nanoscale emitters generated a field of quantum probabilistic signals, not a language in any traditional sense, but a dynamic information space that could adapt its fundamental communication parameters in real time. It wasn't about translation. It was about creating a shared experiential framework. The dragon's attack shifted. What began as a destructive impulse became something else entirely, a probing, an investigation. The creature was no longer attempting to destroy. It was attempting to understand. Embedded within Marcus's neural implant, a series of complex algorithms began processing the interaction. Each moment was a multidimensional data point, a fragment of a larger understanding that transcended traditional scientific boundaries. The pit around them became more than a physical space. It transformed into an information nexus, a place where different evolutionary paths could intersect, could communicate, could potentially understand each other. Marcus wasn't just surviving. He was negotiating, not with words, not with traditional communication, but with the fundamental language of adaptation itself. Time became liquid, not metaphorically, literally. The quantum field generated by their interaction began to manipulate temporal perception, creating pockets of compressed and expanded temporal experience. Marcus experienced millennia in heartbeats, witnessed civilizational rises and falls in microsecond fragments. The dragon was more than a creature. It was a living archive, a biological database that had survived multiple galactic extinction events. Its genetic memory wasn't a simple record. It was a complex, multidimensional narrative that could be experienced rather than merely observed. Fragments of history cascaded through Marcus's neural interface. Planetary migrations that spanned thousands of light years. Civilizations that had developed technologies so advanced they could manipulate fundamental universal constants. survival strategies that redefined the very concept of biological adaptation. Most intriguing were the gaps, the moments of collective extinction, not just of species, but of entire evolutionary pathways. Each civilization the dragon's genetic memory recalled had a common thread, a critical moment of systemic failure, a point where adaptive capacity collapsed, where the complexity of survival overwhelmed the species' fundamental capabilities. Humanity was different. The dragon's consciousness parsed this difference with mathematical precision. Humans weren't the strongest, weren't the most technologically advanced, weren't the most physically robust, but they possessed something unprecedented, a recursive adaptive capacity that defied standard evolutionary models, the ability to learn, to modify, to reimagine fundamental limitations. Communication continued its quantum dance, not through language, not through traditional information exchange, but through a complex interchange of potential states. Each moment was a negotiation of existence, a probabilistic exploration of mutual understanding. Marcus's neural implant began to reveal something extraordinary. The pit wasn't just a prison. It was a sophisticated testing ground, a place where the Draconian Empire evaluated species across multiple dimensional planes. Countless prisoners had died here, not through direct execution, but through the sheer psychological and biological stress of the environment. The bioluminescent ecosystem around them began to respond. Fungal networks shifted their chemical communications, creating intricate pattern matrices that seemed to document their interaction. Each glowing tendril became a living recording device, archiving this unprecedented moment of interspecies communication. Genetic memories revealed the dragon's origin. It wasn't simply a creature. It was the last survivor of a guardian species, biological sentinels designed to protect a cosmic ecosystem far more complex than any single planetary civilization could comprehend. The Draconian Empire had captured it, contained it, turned a sophisticated guardian into a mere execution instrument. But guardians, by their very nature, cannot be truly contained. Marcus's most critical advantage wasn't his technology. It wasn't his training. It was his species' fundamental capacity for contextual reimagination. Where other species saw barriers, humans saw opportunities. Where traditional logic suggested limitation, human consciousness found alternative pathways. The dragon's perception began to shift. What initially registered as a potential threat now became something far more complex, a potential ally, a variable in a cosmic equation that defied traditional computational models. Quantum probability calculations streamed through their shared information field. Millions of potential interaction scenarios explored simultaneously, each branch revealing different survival strategies, different potential futures. This wasn't just survival. This was a fundamental reevaluation of evolutionary potential. The pit around them became more than a physical space. It transformed into an information nexus, a place where different evolutionary trajectories could intersect, could communicate, could potentially redefine fundamental universal narratives. Marcus understood something profound in that moment. Survival wasn't about strength. It was about the capacity to fundamentally reimagine what survival meant. Strategy emerged from silence. The first true collaboration wasn't a verbal agreement or a physical cooperation. It was a systemic alignment of survival imperatives that transcended individual existence. Marcus and the dragon began to construct a mutual escape strategy that would rewrite the fundamental understanding of interspecies interaction. Hidden communication channels activated through methods no draconian monitoring system could comprehend. Marcus's micro-transmission device, a piece of technology so advanced it existed in a state between theoretical possibility and tangible reality, began encoding information into the pit's geological structures themselves. Every crack in the stone, every microscopic mineral deposit, every thermal gradient became a potential communication vector. The dragon's contribution was equally revolutionary. Its biological systems could manipulate geological resonance frequencies in ways that defied conventional scientific understanding. What appeared to be simple biological processes were actually complex information manipulation techniques that could reshape physical matter at a molecular level. Intelligence agencies on Earth would have sacrificed entire budgets to understand even a fraction of what was happening in this moment. Their plan wasn't about escape in any traditional sense. It was a systemic disruption, a calculated intervention designed to challenge the fundamental power structures of the Draconian Empire. Marcus accessed fragments of classified mission parameters embedded in his neural implant. This wasn't a simple reconnaissance mission. It was a probabilistic intervention, a carefully designed scenario meant to introduce a critical variable into the Draconian social and political ecosystem. The dragon comprehended this at a level that human intelligence could only partially process. Its genetic memory contained records of countless civilizational collapses, each one triggered by seemingly insignificant systemic interruptions. A single point of failure, a momentary vulnerability. Communication continued through a complex matrix of quantum entanglement, biological signaling, and strategic calculation. Their first concrete step was surprisingly mundane. They began mapping the pit's structural weaknesses, not as a means of immediate escape, but as a comprehensive understanding of the environmental constraints. Each microscopic flaw became a potential strategic advantage. The Draconian monitoring systems were sophisticated, quantum-encrypted surveillance networks that could track molecular-level changes. But sophistication didn't mean infallibility. Every system had blind spots. Every network had potential points of interference. Marcus's neural implant began generating interference patterns, complex algorithmic sequences that would look like random noise to conventional monitoring systems. But they were anything but random. Each pattern was a carefully constructed information packet designed to create specific systemic uncertainties. The dragon's biological systems complemented this approach. Its ability to manipulate thermal and electromagnetic gradients created natural camouflage that went beyond traditional stealth technologies. It wasn't about hiding. It was about existing in a state of calculated ambiguity. Their alliance defied traditional understanding of cooperation. This wasn't a partnership born of friendship or mutual affection. It was a complex strategic alignment. Two entities recognizing that their individual survival was contingent on a broader systemic intervention. Fragments of the dragon's genetic memory revealed something critical. The pit wasn't just a prison. It was a sophisticated testing ground, a place where the Draconian Empire evaluated potential threats, parsed evolutionary capabilities, and maintained their galactic dominance. By existing here, by surviving, by forming this unlikely alliance, they were doing more than planning an escape. They were introducing a fundamental challenge to an entire imperial paradigm. The communication between them continued, a dance of strategic potential that existed beyond traditional linguistic or biological boundaries. Each moment was a negotiation. Each interaction a complex mathematical equation of survival and systemic disruption. Marcus understood something profound in that moment. True revolution doesn't begin with grand gestures. It begins with the smallest of systemic interruptions. The uprising began with absolute silence. Draconian security protocols were legendary, multi-layered defense systems that had crushed countless rebellions across multiple star systems. Their containment technologies could neutralize entire planetary populations with mathematical precision. They believed in absolute control. They had never encountered anything like this. The first indication of trouble came as a microscopic perturbation in the pit's environmental monitoring systems. A thermal gradient shift so subtle that it would have been invisible to any but the most sensitive quantum-level sensors. But it was a deliberate signal, the first note in a symphonic dismantling of imperial control. Marcus's neural implant had become more than a communication device. It was a living infiltration mechanism, generating complex interference patterns that warmed through the Draconian communication networks like intellectual antibodies. Each packet of information was a precision-crafted virus designed to create systematic uncertainty. The dragon's contribution was equally ingenious. Its biological systems could generate quantum-level disruption fields that interfered with technological surveillance in ways no conventional jamming technology could comprehend. What appeared to be simple biological processes were actually sophisticated information warfare techniques. When the Draconian guards descended, they found something entirely unexpected. The pit was no longer a simple execution chamber. It had become a perfect storm of systemic vulnerability. Communication systems began to fragment. Surveillance networks developed inexplicable blind spots. Security protocols started to contradict themselves in ways that defied logical explanation. It was as if the very fabric of imperial control was being systematically unraveled from within. The lead guard, a veteran of countless containment operations, realized something was wrong precisely 2.7 seconds before the complete system collapse. His neural augmentations began sending conflicting signals. Threat assessments became nonsensical. Tactical overlay displays dissolved into cascading mathematical impossibilities. Marcus moved with a precision that transcended human physical limitation. Years of specialized training combined with the dragon's quantum-level awareness created a combat algorithm that was more mathematical equation than traditional fighting technique. Each movement was a calculated intervention, not just in physical space, but in the very systemic infrastructure of draconian control. Their attack wasn't about destruction. It was about deconstruction. Imperial security systems were designed to respond to specific threat parameters: weapons, physical resistance, conventional rebellion tactics. They had never encountered a threat that attacked the very fundamental logic of their control mechanisms. The dragon's biological systems generated electromagnetic fields that interfered with technological systems in ways that defied conventional physics. Weapon systems began to malfunction. Communication networks started to generate recursive feedback loops. What should have been a simple execution became a comprehensive systemic failure. Surrounding infrastructure began to react in unexpected ways. Blast doors developed quantum-level inconsistencies. Security protocols started generating self-contradictory instructions. It was as if the very concept of imperial control was being mathematically dismantled. Most species would have used this moment to escape. Marcus and the dragon were playing a much larger game. This wasn't about individual survival. This was about introducing a fundamental vulnerability into an entire imperial system. The Draconian Guard's neural augmentations began to betray them. Tactical assessments became nonsensical. Threat calculations dissolved into cascading logical impossibilities. Communication channels filled with recursive information loops that consumed computational resources faster than they could be generated. In the span of 47 seconds, an entire imperial containment facility was rendered completely inoperable, not through physical destruction, but through the most sophisticated form of systemic disruption imaginable. As the last security systems began to fail, Marcus understood something profound. True revolution doesn't require overwhelming force. It requires the ability to introduce a single, perfectly placed point of systematic uncertainty. The dragon's genetic memory resonated with a truth that transcended individual existence. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon is understanding. The aftermath wasn't measured in physical damage. It was calculated in fundamental shifts of galactic perception. News of the incident traveled through communication networks faster than light, faster than information, faster than comprehension. It wasn't a story of rebellion. It was a mathematically precise demonstration of possibility. Across hundreds of star systems, civilizations that had been crushed beneath the Draconian Empire's heel began to reassess their understanding of resistance. The pit was no longer just a location. It had become a symbol, a mathematical proof that systemic control was an illusion. Marcus and the dragon emerged not as conquerors, but as something far more dangerous, a living demonstration of adaptive potential. The Draconian communication networks became a cascading nightmare of uncertainty. Entire administrative sectors found themselves paralyzed by recursive logic loops. Surveillance systems generated contradictory threat assessments. Security protocols began to cannibalize themselves, creating systemic vulnerabilities that spread like an intellectual virus. On Earth, in rooms so classified they didn't officially exist, strategic planners watched the unfolding scenario with a mixture of scientific fascination and strategic calculation. This wasn't just a successful mission. It was a comprehensive proof of concept that would reshape decades of interstellar strategy. The Dragon, last of its guardian species, had found something it had been searching for across millennia. Not revenge, not liberation, but a fundamental validation of its evolutionary purpose. Marcus understood that their action was more than a simple escape. It was a precise intervention designed to introduce a critical variable into a seemingly immutable system. Diplomatic channels across multiple star systems began to vibrate with uncertainty. The Draconian Empire's aura of invincibility had been punctured, not by force, but by the introduction of a single, perfectly placed point of systemic doubt. Alien civilizations that had long been subjugated began to recalculate their own potential. If a single human and a last-of-its-kind guardian could generate such comprehensive disruption, what other possibilities existed? The pit itself underwent a transformation. What was once a symbol of imperial control became a site of unprecedented scientific interest. Researchers from multiple species would spend decades attempting to understand the complex quantum and biological interactions that had occurred within its walls. Marcus's neural implant continued its work, even as they moved beyond the immediate area of conflict. It was collecting, analyzing, transmitting, creating a comprehensive record of an interaction that defied traditional understanding of interspecies communication. The Dragon's biological systems began to undergo a metamorphosis, not a physical transformation, but a fundamental realignment of its genetic memory. Millennia of isolated existence gave way to a new purpose, a recognition that survival was more complex than simple preservation. Quantum communication networks, invisible to most species, began to shift. The interaction between Marcus and the Dragon had created resonance patterns that would continue to propagate across dimensional boundaries, introducing subtle modifications to established systemic understandings. On Earth, classified debriefings would continue for decades. Each analysis would reveal new layers of complexity. The mission was never about a simple escape. It was about introducing a fundamental challenge to established galactic paradigms. The Draconian Empire would never be the same. But more importantly, the very concept of imperial control had been fundamentally challenged. As they moved towards an uncertain future, Marcus and the Dragon were more than allies. They were a living demonstration of a fundamental universal truth. Adaptation is the most powerful force in existence. Possibility became their only constant. And in that possibility, entire civilizations found hope.